The air inside the courthouse felt heavy, as if the walls themselves disapproved of what was about to happen. Clara stood beside Adrian Blackwell at the altar, though the word felt wrong. There were no flowers, no vows, no witnesses who cared, only their lawyers, 2 board members, and the silent exchange of power disguised as matrimony. The sound of pens scratching against paper echoed louder than any declaration of love ever could. Adrian's signature was sharp and decisive, a man used to sealing deals rather than beginnings. When Clara took the pen, her hand trembled just enough for him to notice. Their eyes met briefly, his calm and distant, hers burning with quiet defiance. "You'll have my name and protection," he said under his breath, his tone controlled and businesslike, "but never my heart." She nodded once, more out of pride than agreement. The words stung, but she'd expected them. This was not a marriage born of affection or desire, but of necessity. Her father's company had been drowning, and Adrian's offer, marriage in exchange for a merger, had been the only lifeline. As they posed for a photo to make the union official, Adrian's hand brushed her arm, the contact cold and impersonal. His cologne was sharp, expensive, and unfamiliar. Just like everything else about him, the drive to the Blackwell mansion was silent. Rain had started to fall, thin at first, then harder, streaking across the car windows like silver threads. Clara watched the droplets race each other down the glass, her reflection faint in the blur of city lights. Adrian sat opposite her, scrolling through his phone, his focus elsewhere. The mansion came into view, a sprawling structure of glass and stone perched on the edge of the cliffs overlooking the ocean. Beautiful, yes, but there was something lifeless about it. No laughter, no warmth, only precision and perfection. A butler opened the door as they entered, greeting Adrian with a quiet, "Welcome home, sir." He did not introduce Clara, did not even glance in her direction. She might as well have been another acquisition, something to be stored and forgotten. "You'll have your own room," Adrian said, as they walked down the long marble hall. "Use whatever space you wish. Just stay out of my study." His tone was polite, detached, rehearsed. It was the voice of a man who had drawn boundaries long before meeting her. "Of course," Clara replied, her voice steady. She refused to let him see the sting beneath her calm. The room prepared for her was elegant but cold. White linens, silver fixtures, and a view of the sea crashing violently against the rocks below. The wind howled through the cracks of the old windows, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled. She unpacked in silence, folding her few clothes into the cavernous wardrobe, each movement deliberate, mechanical. On the dresser sat the only personal item she'd brought, a small framed photo of her parents before everything had fallen apart. She set it upright, a fragile rebellion against the emptiness of the room. From the hallway came the sound of Adrian's footsteps, steady and measured. He paused briefly outside her door, as if considering whether to speak, then continued on. The soft closing of another door, his study, no doubt, echoed down the hall. Clara sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the rain against the glass. She thought of her father's desperate eyes when he'd told her about the debt, of the shame in his voice when he'd admitted the only way to save their company was to accept Adrian's proposal. She thought of Adrian's face at the signing table. Handsome, yes, but distant, carved from stone. Outside, lightning illuminated the ocean, turning the waves silver for a brief, beautiful second before darkness returned. Clara rose, walking to the window. The sea roared below, wild and untamed, so unlike the stillness inside this house. She placed a hand against the cold glass, her reflection faint beside the storm. "So this is it," she whispered softly, her breath fogging the pain. "The life I sold myself into." A long silence followed, broken only by the sound of thunder rolling over the cliffs. She turned back toward the empty bed, the untouched linens waiting like a quiet accusation. "I may be his wife on paper," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the storm. but he'll never own me. As the wind howled through the mansion and the rain lashed the windows, Clara lay down beneath the sterile sheets, eyes open, heart awake. A prisoner in name, but already plotting her freedom. The morning light spilled through the tall windows of the Blackwell mansion like liquid gold. But nothing about the house felt warm. Clara woke to the sound of the ocean crashing against the cliffs below her room. She sat up in bed, the silence around her almost too heavy to bear. She had slept in a stranger's house. And worse still, she had married that stranger. Adrian was gone long before she came downstairs. His side of the house silent, except for the distant hum of machines and the faint click of keys from his private study. Clara walked, barefoot across the marble floor, her reflection following her in the polished surface. Servants moved quietly around her, polite but distant, as if unsure how to address the woman who was now their mistress by contract. Alone, she poured herself a cup of coffee from the silver pot on the counter, but it was already cold. The note beside it was short and sharp. "I'll be at the office until late. Don't wait for me, Adrian." His handwriting was precise, like everything about him. Clara stared at the words until they blurred. She had agreed to this life, but she hadn't realized how lonely it would feel within 24 hours of the wedding. She already felt invisible to keep herself from drowning in silence. She wandered the mansion exploring, room after room, until she reached one she hadn't seen before. A locked door at the end of a narrow corridor. The handle was brass, old and worn. Curiosity flared. She tried it once, twice, and when it didn't move, she stepped back wondering what. He kept hidden inside that evening clouds gathered over the ocean, dark and swollen. The kind of storm that felt alive. Clara stood by the window, watching lightning split the sky when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned. Adrian was home. His hair damp, his suit jacket still clinging to his shoulders. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were alert, sharp. "The storm suits this place, doesn't it?" he said without greeting. Thunder rolled through the walls before she could answer. "It's beautiful," Clara replied quietly, "and wild like it doesn't belong to anyone." His gaze lingered on her for a second longer than necessary. Then he moved past her to pour himself a drink. "You shouldn't romanticize chaos." He said the storm destroys more than it creates. "You sound like someone who's speaking from experience," she replied. Adrian's hand tightened around the glass before he set it down on the table and walked toward her. His expression unreadable. "You don't know me, Clara, and that's how it should stay." She didn't flinch. "I wasn't trying to know you," she said softly. "Just trying to understand the man I married." His eyes darkened, and for a heartbeat, she saw something there. Something raw, before it disappeared behind the familiar mask. He turned away, his tone colder now. "This marriage is a transaction, nothing more. Stop trying to find meaning where there isn't any." Clara felt the words hit, but she refused to let them break her. She took a slow breath. "You keep telling yourself that, Adrian, but someday you might realize people aren't contracts. They don't stay quiet, just because you sign them into silence." Lightning flashed across his face, illuminating the tension between them for a moment. Neither moved, the air heavy, and charged like the storm outside. Then, without a word, he walked past her down the hall, his footsteps fading until the only sound left was the rain hammering the windows. Later that night, Clara stood again before the locked door at the end of the corridor. The thunder masked her movements. She tried the handle once more. It turned this time. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit room filled with canvases covered in white sheets, and the faint smell of turpentine and dust. She stepped inside, pulling one of the sheets away. Her breath caught. Beneath it was a painting, a portrait of a woman with golden hair and green eyes, smiling at the viewer with haunting familiarity. The signature at the bottom read, "Adrian Blackwell the Next." Flash of lightning lit the words carved faintly into the frame beneath the woman's name 1 year before her death. Clara's pulse quickened. She stepped back, her mind racing. Who was she? And why was her memory locked away like a secret tomb thunder? Crashed again. Shaking the walls, the storm had come to life outside. But the real storm was brewing inside the mansion for the first time. Clara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather and everything to do with the man she had married. The storm raged all night, but it wasn't the thunder that kept Clara awake. It was the image of that woman's face on the canvas, golden hair, green eyes. A smile frozen in time. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain until the sky turned pale gray when morning came. Adrian was gone again. No trace of him except a faint smell of his cologne in the hallway, and the door to the hidden room locked once more. The mansion felt like a labyrinth of secrets she wandered through, its corridors trying to piece together fragments of the man she'd married. His life was perfectly arranged, every object in place, every moment measured. Yet behind the order, there was something deeply broken. She could feel it like a heartbeat, beneath marble floors. Around noon, she stepped out into the gardens. The ocean below was restless waves crashing against black cliffs. She found herself drawn to a small greenhouse tucked behind the main house. The air inside was humid, heavy with the scent of lilies and salt. Someone had been tending to these plants recently. The soil was fresh-watered, not abandoned as she'd expected. She was still bent over a rose bush when a voice came from behind her. "Careful, those have thorns." Clara turned. Adrian stood in the doorway, his white shirt rolled at the sleeves, raindrops still glistening in his hair. The sight startled her. Not because of his presence, but because he looked different, softer somehow. "Humani didn't know you, Garden," she said. He stepped inside, his tone unreadable. "I don't nod anymore." It was her thing. Clara froze the woman in the painting. She whispered before she could stop herself. Adrian's expression shifted, a flash of pain so quick she almost missed it. "You've been in that room." His voice was low but dangerous. The air between them thickened. "I didn't mean to pry." Clara said, "I just found it unlocked." He turned away, his jaw tight. "You had no right. That room isn't part of your arrangement." She folded her arms, trying to stay calm, "And yet you left it open. Maybe some part of you wanted someone to see it." Adrian faced her again, his eyes dark and furious. "That woman was my fiancée. She died 2 years ago in a car accident on this very cliff because of me." The confession hit her like a wave. She took a small step forward, her voice soft. "You can't keep punishing yourself forever, Adrian." For a moment he didn't speak, his breath shallow as if he'd run a long way. She wanted to understand, he said finally. "But she didn't. She left before I could fix anything. And now you're here pretending to fix what can't be fixed." His anger wasn't aimed at her, but at the ghost that lived behind his words. Clara's heart ached for him, but she refused to be a replacement for the dead. "Maybe I'm not here to fix you," she said. "Maybe I'm here to remind you you're still alive." The silence that followed was thick with electricity, like the air before lightning. He stared at her eyes, burning with something fierce and uncertain. Then without warning, he stepped closer, his voice rough. "Don't look at me like that, like you see something worth saving." "Because I do." Clara whispered, the words slipped out before she could stop them for a heartbeat. He just stood there, the distance between them, charged with something she couldn't name. His hand lifted as if to touch her, then dropped again. He turned away abruptly, his control snapping back into place. "Go back to the house. Clara, this conversation is over." She left without arguing, but her heart was pounding, the moment replaying in her mind. His voice, his eyes, the brief crack in his armor. Something was changing between them, something dangerous and impossible to ignore. That night she couldn't sleep. The wind howled outside, and she thought she heard footsteps in the hallway. Faint, slow, deliberate. She sat up, listening. The door creaked open slightly, but no one was there. Only the faint scent of his cologne drifting through the dark. When she woke the next morning, there was a single rose on her nightstand, freshly cut from the greenhouse dew still clinging to its petals. No note, no explanation. Only the quiet truth. She couldn't deny the man who swore he would never love her had begun to lose control. The wind off the cliff screamed against the mansion walls that night like it was trying to warn them of something terrible to come. Clara stood in front of the window watching waves crash far below the rose still rested on, her nightstand beside her untouched dinner plate. She had told herself it meant nothing, just a gesture of apology, maybe a truce. But deep inside she knew Adrian Blackwell was changing. And so was she. The next morning she found him in the study for the first time since the wedding. The door was open. He sat behind a massive oak desk, his eyes fixed on the screen, but she could tell he wasn't really seeing what was in front of him. His voice when he spoke was quiet, like he was tired of pretending. "I shouldn't have left that rose," he said without looking up. It was inappropriate. Clara leaned against the doorframe, her tone steady. Was it inappropriate or honest? His eyes lifted to hers, sharp and unreadable. Maybe both, he admitted then. After a pause, he added, "You're not what I expected, Clara. You're not afraid of me." She smiled faintly. "Maybe that's because I don't see you as something to fear." For the first time, a ghost of a smile crossed his lips. It made him look younger almost, human again. Before she could answer, a loud crack of thunder shook the room, and the lights flickered. The storm had returned, fierce and sudden rain hammering against the glass. Adrian rose from his chair, glancing at the window with a frown that's not just wind. He muttered a moment later. The security system chimed the sound. Harsh and urgent power failure, backup generators activating. Clara felt the tension ripple through him as he grabbed his phone, but there was no signal. He looked at her. "Stay inside," he ordered. "I'll check the gate," before she could protest. He was gone. She waited by the stairs, listening to the storm. Swallow the world outside. Then a shadow moved past the window, quick and deliberate. Not Adrian. Something colder. Lightning flashed, revealing a man in a dark coat near the fence line. Her heart pounded. She rushed to the hall, calling his name, but only the thunder answered when Adrian returned minutes later, soaked to the skin. His expression was grim. "Someone cut the security lines," he said. "We're offline completely. The staff were sent home early because of the weather, which means it's just us in the house." Her stomach tightened. "Do you think it's random?" "I never believe in random," he said, his tone hard as iron, his eyes scanning every shadow like a soldier in a battlefield. He motioned for her to follow. "Stay close to me until I say otherwise." The generator hummed faintly, but half the lights stayed dead. Long corridors flickered in and out of darkness. They reached the main control room near the basement. Adrian keyed in a manual override as lightning illuminated his face. She saw it clearly. The tension, the fear beneath his calm. "What aren't you telling me?" Clara asked. He hesitated, then said, "There's a man who blames me for something that happened years ago. He's not the forgiving kind. I didn't think he'd find me here." His voice dropped lower. "And if he's here tonight, he's not here to talk." The sound of breaking glass upstairs cut through. The noise of the storm. Clara jumped. Adrian moved, first instinct. Pure protection. He caught her wrist, pulling her behind him. "Stay low." He whispered every word. Sharp and steady. They crept back through the hallway, the flickering lights casting monstrous shapes on the walls. Then silence. Absolute silence. No wind. No thunder. Nothing. The tension snapped when a figure appeared at the end of the hall, tall, drenched in rain. Holding something metallic that glinted with the next flash of lightning, Adrian pushed Clara behind him, his voice low and deadly. "Get out of my house." A voice answered, smooth and familiar. Too familiar for Clara's comfort. Old friends shouldn't need invitations. Adrian. The man stepped into the light, a scar running across, his jaw eyes full of venom. Clara recognized him from a photograph she had seen hidden under Adrian's files. Victor Hale, his former business partner, the one Adrian had once accused of stealing millions, but who had disappeared without a trace. Well, well, Victor said, smirking. The storm brought me home. He looked at Clara, then back at Adrian. Guess I interrupted your little domestic peace. Adrian's body tensed like a wire about to snap. Clara could see it in his eyes. This wasn't about money or revenge anymore. This was personal and dangerous. Lightning exploded outside thunder, shaking the foundation of the house, as Victor took one slow step forward and said, "Tonight, Blackwell, we finish what you started." Clara didn't know if the storm outside or the one inside would destroy them first. But she knew one thing. The man she had married wasn't just fighting ghosts anymore. He was fighting something real, and she was now part of it, whether she liked it or not. The air in the mansion felt thick, heavy with the smell of rain and danger. Clara stood frozen as the two men faced each other, lightning spilling through the windows like fire. Adrian's voice was low but sharp enough to cut through the storm. What? Do you want Victor money revenge or just to finish what you started? Victor's smile was thin and cruel. I want the truth, he said slowly, stepping closer. You destroyed me, Blackwell. You made sure everyone believed I stole from our company. But we both know who really did. Adrian's jaw tightened. You forged the contracts, you leaked confidential data to our competitors. Don't rewrite history. Victor's laughter was harsh, echoing through the marble hall. You think I came back for excuses? He turned to Clara, his eyes narrowing. So, this is the new wife, pretty brave to marry a man who ruins everything he touches. Clara's heart raced, but she didn't look away, her voice steady. What happened between you two ended years ago. Why come back now? Because he took everything from me. Victor said, his voice cracking around the edges. My name, my career, my family. He left me with nothing but anger and storms like this. His gaze flicked to the window, lightning flashing in his eyes. I wanted him to feel what I felt. Adrian stepped forward, his presence calm but lethal. You're trespassing. Get out before I call the police. Victor lifted the small metallic object in his hand, revealing not a weapon but a small drive, silver and glinting. This is your truth, Adrian. One that will burn everything you've built. He tossed it onto the floor where it skidded to a stop near Clara's feet. She glanced at it, then back at Adrian. His expression didn't change, but his knuckles whitened. Pick it up, she said softly. No, he answered too quickly. Victor smirked. Looks like she doesn't know what her husband hides does. The generator flickered again, plunging the hallway into half-darkness. Thunder rattled the windows. Victor's voice carried. Through the gloom, the files in there show where the money really went, millions. Blackwell offshore accounts hidden under shell companies. Your father's death. Your empire all built on lease. Shut up. Adrian snapped, his composure cracking for the first time. Clara looked between them, confusion and fear tangling in her chest. Adrian, tell me it's not true. He didn't answer. His silence was worse than a confession. Victor took a slow step backward, satisfied that his words had landed. You ruined me. Once Adrian? He said maybe tonight the storm can even the score before Adrian could move. Victor disappeared into the shadows toward the east wing. The sound of a door slamming echoed down the hall. Clara turned to Adrian, her voice trembling. What? Is he talking about? What money? What did you do? His eyes met hers, raw and haunted. It's not what you think, Clara. But she stepped away from him. No, tell me, what am I supposed to think? I married a stranger. A man who hides ghosts behind every locked door. Before he could explain, a blinding flash outside shattered the moment the power cut, completely plunging them into total darkness. Clara felt Adrian grab her hand. "Stay close," he said. "We can't let him leave with whatever he has." They moved through, the mansion guided only by the flashes of lightning outside, shadows stretching and twisting around them. From somewhere upstairs came the sound of glass breaking and footsteps moving fast. Adrian cursed under his breath. "He's heading for my office. That's where the main servers are." They reached the staircase just as another crash sounded, followed by a shout. "Clara, wait here," he said. She shook her head. "No, if this ends tonight, it ends with me knowing the truth." Together they climbed the stairs, their footsteps muffled by the storm. When they reached the office, the door was open, the papers inside scattered by the wind from a shattered window. Victor stood by the desk, his coat whipping in the gale. His face wild. "This ends now, Blackwell," he shouted. Adrian lunged forward. They collided, the two men grappling the flash drive flying across the floor. Clara darted forward, snatching it before it could slide under the desk. The sound of thunder swallowed their struggle until Victor shoved Adrian hard enough that he hit the corner of the desk, blood streaking his temple. Clara's voice cut through the chaos. "Stop. This, both of you." Victor turned on her fury, twisting his features. "Give it to me," he demanded. Adrian pushed himself up, staggering. "No, Clara, don't." His tone urgent, desperate. She looked between them, the storm roaring louder every second. Then she made a choice. She hurled the drive into the fireplace. Flames swallowed it whole. The room went silent except for the fire crackling. Victor stared in disbelief. "You just destroyed everything," he whispered. "Everything that could prove who he really is." "Maybe that's what needs to happen," Clara said quietly. "Maybe both of you need to let the past die." Victor took a step toward her, but Adrian grabbed his arm, forcing him back. "Get out, Victor." Adrian's voice was low, dangerous. "Before I make sure you never step foot near her again." Victor's eyes burned with hatred, but he turned and disappeared into the storm outside the door. Slamming behind him, Adrian sank into the nearest chair, his breath ragged, the firelight flickering over his bruised face. Clara stood watching him, her heart torn between anger and compassion. "Tell me the truth," she said softly. "Not tomorrow, not later." Now his gaze lifted to hers, filled with something raw and breaking. "I didn't steal the money, Clara," he said. "But my father did, and I covered it up to protect the family name and the company." She stared at him, the storm crashing around them. The truth, between them, heavier than thunder outside. For a long moment neither spoke, and then Clara whispered the words that would change everything. "I don't know if I can love a man who hides behind lies, but I think I already do." Outside, lightning lit the sky, turning the ocean silver for an instant inside the mansion. The fire burned bright, like the beginning of something that could either destroy them or finally set them free. The storm passed by morning, but the silence it left behind was worse than thunder. Clara sat in the grand dining room, staring at the untouched breakfast in front of her. The smell of burnt wood from the fireplace still clung to the air. Every sound in the mansion felt sharp. Even the ticking of the clock seemed louder than usual. Adrian hadn't come down yet. She didn't know if he was avoiding her, or trying to find a way to explain the truth that had shattered whatever fragile peace they had built. When he finally appeared, his face was pale, the bruise on his temple darker. Under the morning light, he looked at her but didn't sit down. "We need to talk," he said quietly. She nodded, her hands tightening around the edge of the table. "About your father?" She asked. "About everything," he replied. He paced the room, before speaking, his voice steady but heavy. Every word seemed to cost him more than the last. "I was 24 when my father's company started to fall apart. He said the auditors discovered missing funds, millions that had vanished." He looked, away, staring at the ocean beyond the glass wall. He did it to protect his empire. But when it came crashing down, he begged me to take the blame, so the shareholders wouldn't turn on him. I did. and it destroyed everything. Clara listened silently, the storm inside her chest growing stronger. So Victor was telling the truth about some of it. Adrian nodded. Yes, but he never understood why I covered it up. He wanted revenge. Not answers after the scandal. My father died and Victor vanished, taking what was left of our partnership with him. I buried everything, but the guilt never went away. His voice broke slightly as he looked at her. You were right, Clara. I hide behind lies because the truth is uglier than any of them. She stood slowly walking toward him until she was close enough to see the exhaustion in his eyes. You could have told me, she said softly. I married your silence, not your truth. Adrian took a breath, his next words low and raw. I didn't want you to see the man I was before, you the man who built walls out of guilt. She met his gaze unflinching. Maybe you forgot. I never asked for perfection, Adrian. I just wanted honesty. Before either could speak again, a phone rang, the sound, slicing through the quiet. Adrian answered, and his expression shifted from confusion to fury. Who is this? The color drained from his face. What do you mean she's missing? He hung up his voice, shaking. That was security. They said the maid who works the upper floors didn't show up today, and the car she drives was found abandoned near the cliffs. Clara frowned. Maybe she left because of last night. Adrian shook his head. No. She had been working for me for 5 years. Loyal, quiet, too loyal to just walk away. He grabbed his coat. We're checking. The surveillance, but something doesn't add up. She followed him to the control room in the basement. Monitors lined the wall, showing every corner of the property. Adrian replayed footage from the night before rain streaking across the camera lenses. At first, everything looked normal. Then Clara saw it, a shadow moving along the West Wing corridor around midnight. Long after Victor had left, Adrian froze, zooming in. The figure was wearing a black raincoat and carrying something metallic in one hand, not a weapon. A phone, its light flashing once before disappearing into the dark corridor. That's the same hallway as your father's old study, Clara said, her voice tight. Adrian's hands clenched the door to. That room has been sealed since the day he died. No one has access. Not even the staff. He stared at the screen, a muscle twitching in his jaw. Whoever that was knew exactly where to go. Clara felt a chill crawl up her spine. Adrian turned to her, his eyes blazing. I think Victor wasn't working alone. They rushed to the West Wing. The corridor dim and cold. The air smelled faintly of sea salt and something metallic. The door to the old study was slightly open. Adrian pushed it wider, his hand trembling. Inside, dust floated in the faint light. But the desk at the center of the room was disturbed. Drawers open, papers scattered. A portrait of his father lay cracked on the floor. Someone had searched this place. Clara bent to pick up a torn envelope. Inside was a small key marked with a single letter. Adrian stared at it, his voice barely above a whisper. Victor's name. The letter felt heavy between them. What if this wasn't about revenge? Clara said. What if it's about something bigger? Something that started before we ever met. He looked at her, eyes sharp with realization. My father's offshore accounts, the ones Victor claimed I used to steal the money. They weren't his. They were my father's. And whoever has this key might be after what's left of that fortune. Thunder rolled again in the distance. Though the sky was clear outside, Clara's heartbeat quickened. Adrian closed his hand around the key, his expression turning hard. This isn't over, he said. And now it's not just about my past, it's about whoever's still trying to destroy what's left of it. Clara met his gaze, calm and steady. Then we find them, she said together. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall again, soft at first, then faster, as if the storm that had left was returning not from the sea but from the secrets they had just unearthed inside the house. The walls seemed to hold their breath, waiting for the next strike of truth to tear them open. The storm returned that night stronger than before. Wind rattled the windows and waves crashed against the cliffs like warning drums. Clara couldn't sleep. She sat by the fireplace, staring into the flames, the small key they had found glinting in her hand. Adrian had locked himself in his office hours ago, trying to trace where the missing maid had gone. But she could feel his unease seeping through the walls. The mansion felt alive, restless, as if holding secrets of its own. The lights flickered, and somewhere far away a door creaked. She rose, slowly, her bare feet cold against the marble floor. Something inside her whispered that tonight was not just another storm night. She walked through the dark hallway toward the old study. Again, the smell of damp air and dust filled her lungs. The doctor was still open slightly. She pushed it wider and froze inside the room. Someone had lit a candle, its flame trembling in the wind, seeping through the cracks of the window. A shadow moved. Clara's heart slammed against her ribs. "Who's there?" she whispered. The light shifted and Adrian stepped forward, his face half lit, half shadowed. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly, his voice tired but heavy with something unspoken. "I couldn't sleep," she replied. "I kept thinking about the key, and the missing maid." Adrian's eyes flicked toward the desk where papers were spread out. "I found something," he said. "It's worse than I thought." He handed her an old file. The pages yellowed by time she flipped through them, confusion tightening her brow. "These are property records, offshore transactions." And another name repeated again and again. Victor Adrian's jaw clenched. "He was never after me," he said slowly. "He was after this. These accounts were used to launder money for a private group years ago, and whoever owns that network still wants what's left." Clara looked up at him. "So this isn't just about your father or the company. This is about something bigger." Adrian nodded. "Yes. And Victor must have discovered it before he came here." Before Clara could respond, the lights flickered once more, then died completely. The candlelight quivered as a gust of wind burst through the half-broken window. A whisper drifted through the hall. Not the wind, not thunder. A voice. Adrian froze, hearing it too. They both turned toward the corridor. Footsteps echoed, slow, deliberate, the kind that made your heart stop counting. Adrian moved first, pulling Clara behind him. "Stay close," he whispered. "Whoever's here, they're not leaving quietly." They crept through the hall. The storm roaring outside the corridor stretched before them. Endless and cold shadows moved against the walls. And for a moment, Clara thought she saw a figure standing near the grand staircase. Tall, still watching lightning, flashed, revealing no one, only the echo of movement. Adrian pulled her toward the control room. "Maybe the generators will show us who's inside." But when they reached the basement, the monitors were already on. Someone had powered them manually, the screens flickering between camera feeds, the West Wing, the kitchen, the entryway, and then one feed froze on screen was the greenhouse. And inside it, standing among the shattered glass, was the maid. Her dress soaked her eyes, blank, staring straight at the camera. Clara gasped. Adrian leaned forward, but before he could say anything, the feed cut to static. He turned to Clara. "I locked that place after last night." He said, "How did she get in?" "We need to go now," she said. But he shook his head. "No, it could be a trap. Whoever's using her wants us to follow." His words barely left his lips before the power surged. The mansion shuddered, and the emergency lights turned red. The air filled with the sound of alarms, low and mechanical. Someone had triggered the lockdown system. They ran toward the main hall, but halfway there, a hidden door near the wine cellar slid open, revealing a staircase leading underground. Adrian stopped staring at it. "I didn't know this existed," Clara said, breathless. His face hardened. "My father must have built it." They exchanged a glance, then descended the narrow staircase. The air growing colder with every step. The walls damp stone instead of marble at the bottom. They found a metal door ajar. Inside was a room lined with old servers humming faintly, and on one table a series of documents covered in dust, the same insignia repeated on every page. The letter Adrian picked up one file, his expression darkening. "This isn't Victor's symbol." He said it's older. The name below it made Clara's blood run cold. Blackwell Foundation classified projects date 15 years ago. Adrian's voice broke as he whispered, "I was never the target. Clara, they wanted what my father hid: the money, the research, everything. Victor was just the messenger." A sound echoed behind them. Footsteps again, slower this time. Deliberate Adrian turned but saw only the flicker of light from the stairway. Whoever was following them was close, too close. They rushed out of the room and sealed the metal door behind them. But as the lock clicked, a faint tapping began from the other side. Rhythmic, deliberate, like someone knocking 3 times. Pausing, then 3 times again. Clara's heart pounded in her chest. Adrian grabbed her hand, his voice low. "We need to get out of this house tonight." Outside thunder split the sky as the mansion groaned under the weight of the storm. The sea rising higher against the cliffs. Clara didn't look back, but she could still hear the knocking echoing, faintly in her ears, like a warning from the past. Refusing to die, rain whipped against the mansion like an angry sea. Each gust pressing harder against the windows, as if the storm was trying to force its way inside. Adrian and Clara moved quickly. Through the dark hall, carrying only a flashlight, and the small key that had already begun to change everything, the power had gone again, and the only sound was the storm outside, and the low hum of the generator fading into silence. Clara clutched the flashlight tighter, her pulse racing. "Where does that underground tunnel lead?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Adrian shook his head. "I don't know. My father built this house with layers of secrets, but that passage wasn't on any of the plans." He paused, then added, "What scares me more is that someone else knew it existed." They reached the greenhouse door where the security feed had last shown the missing maid. Lightning flashed across the shattered glass. The air smelled of wet soil and decay. A single lantern flickered weakly in the corner, and near it footprints leading away toward the cliffs. Clara bent down, touching the ground. "They're fresh," she said. Adrian followed the trail out into the storm, his coat whipping. Behind him, the rain was cold, cutting into his skin. They stopped when they reached the edge of the cliff. Below them, the sea raged white foam, bursting against the rocks, and there, lying on the wet grass, was the maid unconscious, her hand clutching a sealed envelope. Adrian knelt, checking her pulse. "She's alive, Clara." "Take the light." She opened the envelope. Inside was a small black notebook, the pages covered in faded handwriting and maps. Adrian flipped through them, his face hardening. "These are my father's notes." His voice trembled. "He wrote about a hidden account offshore under a name I've never seen before. Hale Industries." Clara's eyes widened. "Victor's name?" Adrian nodded slowly. "No, it's older. Victor must have used that name to access something my father left behind, whatever this is. It didn't die with him. He helped keep it hidden." Thunder rolled over the cliffs, drowning their voices for a moment. Adrian lifted the maid carefully. "We can't stay out here. Whoever sent her didn't mean for her to live." He said they rushed back into the mansion, carrying her inside and laying her near the fire. Clara covered her with a blanket. Her eyes fluttered open, and she whispered a single sentence before falling unconscious. "Again, they know your clothes." Adrian turned to Clara, his face pale. "Who is they?" She shook her head. "I think we're about to find out." The clock struck midnight. The mansion's lights flickered once, then went dark again, and from the upper hallway came the faint creak of footsteps. Adrian grabbed the iron poker from the fireplace and signaled for Clara to stay behind him. The sound grew louder. Steady, deliberate, until a silhouette appeared at the top of the stairs. Lightning flashed, revealing Victor Hale, drenched and wild, his eyes gleaming like a man possessed. "Did you really think it was over?" "Adrian," he shouted, his voice echoing through the grand hall. "You burned the evidence, but you didn't erase the truth." Clara's breath caught. He was supposed to be gone. She whispered. Adrian moved forward. His tone, icy. "What do you want?" "Victor." The other man laughed, hollow and broken. "This isn't about money anymore. This is about legacy. Your father and mine built something monstrous, and they left us to carry its curse." He tossed something metallic onto the floor. It clinked and spun before stopping another key twin to the one Adrian already held. Adrian stared at it. "What is that?" Victor smiled. "You have half the truth. I have the rest. Put them together and you'll see what your father really died protecting before Adrian could react." Victor turned and ran back into the storm. Adrian started after him, but Clara caught his arm. "Don't, it's a trap." He stopped, breathing hard, then looked at her. His voice a whisper, maybe. "But the only way to end this is to face what he's hiding." Clara hesitated, then nodded. "I'm coming with you." They stepped out into the rain, following Victor's trail through the gardens, until they reached the old boathouse perched over the edge of the cliff. Its door hung open, swinging in the wind inside. Lantern light flickered across stacks of old crates and a metal safe bolted to the floor. Victor stood beside it, his hands shaking open it. He demanded. Adrian's eyes narrowed. "Why should I? Because if you don't, the people your father betrayed will find you first." Victor snapped. "They already know where you are." The room shook as another wave hit the cliffs, water spraying through the gaps in the wood. Adrian stepped forward, fitting both keys into the safe. The locks turned. Together with a heavy click, the lid opened, revealing rows of ledgers and a single sealed envelope marked Project. Ash Victor's face went pale. He whispered, "They said it was destroyed." Adrian picked up the envelope. Inside was a photo. Black and white, showing both of their fathers standing beside men in suits and soldiers, and beneath it a single line written in ink. The debt must be paid, before they could speak. A deafening sound tore through the air. The cliffs beneath the boathouse shuddered, splitting with the force of the storm. The floor gave way. Clara screamed as Adrian grabbed her, pulling her toward the door. But Victor was gone, swallowed by the darkness and the roaring sea below. They stumbled out into the rain, collapsing on the grass, the boathouse sliding piece by piece into the water below. The envelope still clutched in Adrian's hand. His voice broke as he said this wasn't just about revenge. "Clara, this was about something buried deep. Something my father tried to hide from everyone." Clara looked at him, her voice trembling. "Then, whatever Project Ash is, it's the reason all this began." Adrian nodded, the storm roaring around them. "Then we end it before it ends us." The morning came gray and cold, the mansion silent, except for the faint hum of waves crashing far below. Clara sat by the fire, the remnants of the storm still echoing in her bones. Adrian had been up all night studying the files they had recovered from the half-sunken boathouse, his eyes hollow. From lack of sleep, the words Project Ash were burned into both their minds. She finally broke the silence. "What is it, Adrian?" He looked up, his expression unreadable. "My father didn't just build a company. He built something bigger. A network of secret investors that funded experimental projects under fake names." Clara frowned. "Experiments? What kind of projects?" He hesitated. "Something about biological research, genetic data, and offshore testing facilities." He whispered his father's notes, hinted at human trials. The funding came from men who disappeared after the first scandal. Her stomach turned. So all the money, the lies, the death, it was all to hide this. He nodded quietly. "If the truth gets out, my entire family name will burn. And maybe it should." Before she could respond, The front gate alarm triggered the sound piercing through the mansion. Adrian rushed to the control panel. The cameras flickered, showing 2 black cars approaching through the rain-tinted glass windows. Men in dark coats stepped out their movements. Sharp calculated. Clara's pulse quickened. Who are they? Adrian stared at the screen, his voice low and steady. The people Victor warned us about, the ones who funded Project Ash. The ones who think I still have what my father promised them. She took a step back. What do? We can't fight them. Adrian grabbed her hand. We run, but not without the proof. They moved quickly through the mansion, gathering the documents in the envelope from the safe Adrian's. Every move was deliberate. The sound of footsteps echoed closer outside. The men were already at the door, banging once, twice. Then the sound of a lock snapping filled the air. Adrian pulled Clara toward the side exit leading to the greenhouse, but the moment they stepped outside, headlights cut through the fog. A man stepped out. Tall, dressed in black, rain dripping from his gloves. Mr. Blackwell, he called out calmly. You have something that belongs to us. Adrian pushed Clara behind him. His tone, icy. Whatever my father promised died with him. The man smiled faintly. Not everything dies. Some things only wait. He raised a small device in his hand, and a flash of light filled the air. A signal pulse strong enough to disable the generator. The mansion went black again, plunging them into silence. The man's voice carried through the dark. Come out now, or we take her instead. Clara's breath. Caught, Adrian whispered. Go to the cliffs. There's a hidden path through the rocks. If we get separated, follow it. I'll find you. She shook her head. I'm not leaving you. But he kissed her forehead softly. You already saved me once. This time let me save you. Before she could argue. He stepped out into the rain, confronting the men as thunder rolled. Across the sky, she watched from the shadows as Adrian stood tall, defiant. The man in black approached, flanked by 2 others. Where is the file? He demanded. Adrian's voice was steady. Gone. He said, burned in the storm. You're too late. The man's face darkened lies. He motioned to one of the guards who moved toward the greenhouse. Clara froze, her heart racing. She waited until they were close, then hurled a stone at the opposite side of the path. The noise made them turn just long enough for her to run. She sprinted through the rain, feet pounding across wet grass, the cliffs looming ahead, wind tearing at her hair behind her. She could hear shouts and the crack of something metallic striking stone. She reached the narrow path half hidden. Behind wild vines, the sea roared below lightning, painting everything in flashes of white. Suddenly a hand caught her arm. She turned ready to fight, but it was Adrian, blood running down his forehead. We have to jump, he said, breathless. She looked at the drop, the waves fierce and merciless. We won't survive. Adrian grabbed her face, his eyes burning with something fierce. We'll survive together. I promise. Before the men could reach them, they jumped. The sea swallowed them both. Cold, dark, endless. For a moment, Clara felt weightless. Then, strong arms pulled her upward. They surfaced, gasping waves dragging them toward the rocks, but Adrian kept her close until they reached the small cave, at the base of the cliffs. Inside, the air was damp and cold. Adrian coughed, wiping the blood from his temple. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a soaked envelope. Not the one from the safe, a smaller one sealed in plastic. The last thing Victor gave me. He said I never opened it. Clara took at her. Hands trembling inside was a single photograph showing Victor standing beside Adrian's father and a young woman. Her eyes unmistakably familiar. It's your mother? Clara whispered. Adrian froze. That's impossible. My mother died when I was 10. She turned the photo over on the back. Written in faded ink was a date. The same year Project Ash began, and beneath it 3 words that changed everything. She's still alive. Adrian stared at the message. the storm raging outside again as if the sea itself reacted to the revelation, his voice barely a whisper. Clara, if she's alive, then everything we knew was a lie. This isn't about revenge anymore. It's about finding her before they do. And in that moment, beneath the cliffs soaked and shaking, they both knew the storm wasn't over. It had only just begun. The next morning dawned pale and broken waves pounded against the cliffs as if trying to erase everything that had happened the night before. Adrian and Clara huddled inside the cave. Exhausted, cold, but alive, the photograph lay between them, its edges curled from the dampness. His mother alive, the thought seemed impossible. And yet the truth was, they're staring back at him in black and white. Clara studied his face. The man who once lived only for control now looked lost, fragile. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. He stared at the sea beyond the rocks. "I'm thinking everything I built. Every lie I told was built to protect a ghost. And that ghost might still be breathing." They climbed out of the cave when the tide began to fall. The storm had finally broken sunlight, cutting through the mist. They followed the narrow path toward the cliffs, where the mansion stood in ruins. Its windows shattered doors, torn open like wounds. Adrian moved through the wreckage, silently searching for anything that could tell him where to go next. In his father's old study, Clara found a torn corner of a letter, the handwriting delicate and unmistakably female. It was signed with the initial MM. The address, written faintly beneath it, a coastal town hours away. Clara handed it to him, her voice steady. "Maybe this is where she went?" He nodded, determination replacing shock. "We go now." They found an old car still intact and drove along the coastal road, the silence between them heavy with questions. When they reached the town, it was quiet. Fishing boats rocked gently in the harbor. The air smelled of salt and smoke. A small chapel stood at the edge of the hill, its door half open inside. The faint glow of candles flickered across wooden pews, and an old woman knelt near the altar, her silver hair catching the light. When she turned, Clara saw the truth at once, the same eyes as Adrian, the same sadness. Deep and endless, Adrian's voice trembled. "Mother." The woman froze the candle in her hand, dropping to the floor, tears welled in her eyes as she rose slowly. "I knew one day you would find me," she whispered. "But not like this." He stepped closer. Anger and relief tangled in his voice. "You let me believe you were dead." Why, she reached out her hand, her voice soft and broken. "Because I had to protect you from your father, from the people he served. Project Ash was not his creation." "Adrian?" "It was mine." The words struck like thunder. Clara felt her breath catch. Adrian shook his head, disbelief and horror twisting across his face. "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath, her eyes full of sorrow. "I was a genetic researcher. We thought we were finding cures for diseases, but we were creating something else. Something that could be weaponized when I realized what it was becoming. I destroyed the data. But your father saved copies hidden in offshore accounts. I faked my death before they could use me again. Adrian's voice broke all these years. I thought he was protecting us." She nodded. "No, he was protecting himself, the men who came after you. They want the same research. They will not stop until they have it." She reached into her coat, pulling out a small drive, and pressed it into his palm. "This is the last fragment of the project. Destroy it and disappear." Before Adrian could respond, the chapel door burst open. Armed men in black suits filled the doorway. Weapons raised, the same men from the mansion. Clara grabbed Adrian's arm. "Run," he pulled his mother behind him as gunfire shattered the silence. They darted through the back of the chapel, down the narrow steps leading to the harbor. Bullets tore through the wooden railing. Adrian shielded Clara as they stumbled toward a small fishing boat, his mother struggling to keep up. One of the men shouted, "Don't! Let them leave." Adrian started the engine, the roar of the motor mixing with the chaos. The boat lurched forward as the first bullet hit the water beside them. They sped across the waves, salt stinging their faces. Clara clung to him, her voice shaking. "They're still following." He turned the boat toward the rocks. "We'll lose them in the fog ahead." His mother's voice called from behind. "Give me the drive, Adrian." Hesitated no, she said firmly. "If they get it, they'll never stop. Let me end what I started." Before he could stop her, she climbed to the edge of the boat, the wind tearing at her hair. She looked back at him with eyes full of love and regret. "I'm sorry for what I made you carry. Tell Clara to keep you human." Then she threw the drive into the sea, the splash swallowed by the wind. Moments later, a bullet struck her shoulder. She fell into the waves. Adrian screamed, diving after her, but the current was too strong. She vanished into the fog like a ghost reclaimed by the ocean hours. Later, the sea had gone calm, the pursuing boats gone. Adrian and Clara drifted in silence, the sky turning orange with dawn. She held his trembling hands, her voice low. "She saved you again, this time from her own past." He nodded, tears mixing with the salt on his face. When they finally reached shore, Adrian turned to look back at the endless sea, the horizon glowing with the first light of morning. The legacy of lies and experiments was gone. Buried beneath the waves, Clara stepped beside him, wrapping her hand in his. "What now?" she asked. He looked at her, and for the first time since their marriage his voice was certain. "Now, we start over. No contracts, no secrets, just us." He paused, then added, "She gave her life to end a story. I'll spend the rest of mine writing a different one." Months later, the mansion stood rebuilt, not as a fortress but as a refuge for children orphaned by storms and war. The Blackwell name reborn, not through power, but through compassion. Adrian walked through the garden, where Clara waited, holding his hand against her growing belly. The ocean stretched behind them, calm and endless. The storm that once destroyed their lives had finally passed, and as the wind carried the scent of the sea across the cliffs, Clara whispered the words that closed their story. "Once I was your wife only on paper. Now I'm the reason you believe in life again." And Adrian smiled, knowing she was right, because love had done what no storm ever could. It had rebuilt him from the ruin of his past.